let's go into the automation platform itself. And let's go into Automation Studio. So Automation Studio is where we build in a low-code canvas automation workflows. So if I go here and I can just search for Jira, I've already set up some workflows here. I've got a step-by-step. This is a blank workflow. So this is a blank canvas, and we're going to build this one step at a time, similar to what we just did in the Jira platform itself. We're going to create an issue. We're going to update it with some comments. We're going to build the transitions, and we'll just do that step by step. And I'll try to show you where all of this data comes from. So again, once we've onboarded our Jira integration, we have access to it from inside this task palette here. So everything that we've onboarded in the system becomes a series of categories and tasks that we can now drag and drop into our visual canvas. So you'll see this, we have an instance of Jira here. This is the adapter that we're using internally, but I've onboarded this. This is the cloud platform itself. And so when I click into here, you'll see that we have all of those API tasks that were onboarded and documented from the Open API file that we integrated now are here, and we were able to use them as drag and drop tasks. So because there are so many, it's very helpful. Now we want to start with issue. Very helpful to it should be create issue here. Do a search, create issue. There we go. And I don't want to confuse it with the existing Jira adapter. This one's called the Jira Cloud Platform REST API. So you'll see here we have create issue. This is what we kind of investigated initially from when I onboarded when we did the integration from the Open API file. So if I drag it and just drop it into here, and we'll try to zoom this in a little bit to make it easier. So I've got create issue as my first task. So this would be automating that first step, just clicking that plus and creating an issue, a new issue. So let me make that a little cleaner here. Now, since this is an API call defined by that document the Open API document, that spec file, it's going to have a series of required variables that we pass to it. And so in this case, the one we're focused on really is this request body payload. Remember, I showed that JSON object that had all of those values in it, those keys and values in that JSON object in the admin essentials section. That's where your examples can come from. But I'm going to give you a simplified example here so that we can kind of see how the basics of everything works. So let me paste something in here and I'll go through it with you. Okay. From here, you can kind of see update history. This will add something to the history file. This is, again, we don't have to set I don't have to set this for this particular API call. We're going to let it be here. Body content type is handled automatically. That's going to be a JSON object. What we're really focused here is this request body payload, which is an object. So it's a JSON object. And I'll zoom into it here, and we'll take a look at it. So again, this comes from understanding the API documentation, whether that's in the admin essentials or you're doing some Google searching and you're seeing other people asking this on the Atlassian website under their documentation and their forums. A JSON object is a JSON object. So whether you're passing this through our platform or a curl call on the command line or a Python or JavaScript code, an object is an object. So they will all be valid for this particular version of the platform. So you can get those from any kind of sources. So what are the key pieces of this to understand here are, we'll start here. We need to specify a project, because if we go here, I have multiple projects. So if I'm creating an issue, which project do I create an issue in? So that makes perfect sense. So if I click on Itential, this is the project we want to set, and it's asking for a key. And so that comes from, if I click on project settings, you'll see there's a key set for IT. So if I go back into Automation Studio and we look at that payload, I'm setting the project key to IT. That's where that comes from. The summary is that title that we would normally set. So here I'm just going to say add VLAN to data center switch. We set a description. So remember, we had to create the ticket first and then click into it, and then we could set the description. And so now I can set the description from this create issue. And I'm going to set the issue type to task. That's a default type. There could be multiple different types of issue types defined. This is one that's by default set. So I'm going to use task here. And now I'm going to assign it to a particular person. Since I'm the only person on the system, I'll assign it to myself. And this is my ID. Now, where does that come from? Well, that's a good question. There's a couple of ways to do it. One of the ways is you could do another API query to show the IDs on the system and then identify that ID. Sometimes you'll need to do that. Other times you can find these things from within the platform. And this is why it's good to kind of go through, even though you might be using this particular platform a lot, going in with the viewpoint of trying to understand what the API fields are asking for. You can find that in some places here. So I'll give you an example. If I go back into this project and I needed to find if I go into this issue here, you'll see there's an assignee here. If I hover over this and do a view profile, this is a little tricky, but you can find the assignee ID from here. It's in the URL. It doesn't show you that anywhere in here, but it's in the URL itself. So sometimes if you know the platform well enough, you can find these values that you need. And the cool thing is once you find the value, it's embedded into your payload, so you don't have to change it, or it's embedded into the workflow or into something we call a transformation. So you don't necessarily have to go and query these things all the time. Once you've figured them out, they usually stay pretty static. And remember, we also had a priority. We can give the priority name here. So we can set the priority when we create these particular issues. By default, it's set to medium, and we're going to set it to medium here as well. And so that's where the basic payload's coming from, and that's where the data fields come from. So the format is defined by the vendor in their documentation. These are the fields that it's going to probably have a minimum set of required fields. This is kind of the minimum set. You might have custom fields. Those are things you'll have to figure out in your environment, but this is how you can go through the process of finding them. Sometimes it's API queries. Sometimes it's working with your Jira admin. Sometimes it's looking through the application itself through the front end. You can find these things. So that's the payload we're going to pass to it. And with that, we should be able to run this and see the issue get created. So from here, as I'm kind of testing this, I'll hit the run button here. We'll run this, and I'll go into what we call Job Manager, which shows us the job executing step by step. And since this is an API call, it immediately finished. You can see the green check mark here. If I double click that task and expand it, it's going to show us the incoming data. So this is the data we passed to that task from our, when I double clicked and saw we set this payload. So you'll see that there. And then most importantly is the output, the outgoing. It shows us that the status was 201, which is a success. And then it gives us some other information as the output from that API call from the Jira server. So now if I go over here to the application itself, we've just automated the creation of that ticket. And along with the creation of that ticket, we set the title, we set the description, we put the assignee, we set the priority.